I never thought that 10 hours of cooking and cleaning would end with my dignity shattered in my own dining room. That morning, I woke up before the sun. My hands moved on autopilot, scrubbing, seasoning, decorating, while my heart fluttered with a strange mix of nerves and excitement. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted them to feel loved. I wanted to feel appreciated. I laid the table with my best china, polished the silverware until it shone. I cooked everyone's favorites: slow braised beef with potatoes, fresh baked rolls, 2 kinds of salad. Even made flan from scratch, the way my mother taught me. I didn't sit down once. My knees ached, but I didn't mind. When my son Martin arrived with the kids, my heart leapt. They rushed in laughing, filling the house with life. And then came Sylvia, his wife, my daughter-in-law. She walked in like she owned the place. Not a hello, not a smile, just a long, slow glance across the room. Her eyes landed on the food, and something in her expression shifted. She wrinkled her nose, gave a little laugh, and said loud enough for every guest to hear, "This old woman's food is fit for dogs." The room fell silent. I stood there, holding a serving spoon midair. My breath caught in my chest. Did she really just say that? Guests glanced at one another. One let out a soft gasp. Someone coughed awkwardly. Sylvia didn't flinch. She poured herself a drink and leaned in to whisper something to a friend, smirking. My son didn't say a word. He wouldn't even look at me. I slowly placed the spoon back on the tray and sat down, feeling my hands tremble. My cheeks burned, not from embarrassment, but from something sharper. Something older. Rage, maybe. Do they think I don't notice? That I'm too old to feel pain? Too soft to defend myself? I had cooked every dish on that table with care. I had spent hours preparing, remembering what each guest liked. I had imagined their faces lighting up, their laughter filling the room. Instead, I sat in silence while my daughter-in-law insulted me like a servant in front of my own family. But I said nothing, because that moment, as humiliating as it was the moment something inside me woke up. A line had been crossed. And while no one else seemed to see it, I did. Sylvia had underestimated me. She thought I would swallow my pride again. That I would clean up after everyone with a smile. That I wouldn't dare speak. But she was wrong. And this was the last time she would ever make me feel small in my own home. I stayed seated for a long moment after Sylvia's words cut through the room. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear the conversations around me anymore, if there even were any. It was like my body had gone still, but my mind was racing. I stared at the dishes on the table, the food I had poured my time, energy, and heart into, and felt a strange numbness wash over me. Was it shock? Or just exhaustion from pretending I mattered? I looked around the room, hoping, just hoping, for someone to say something. Anything. To step in and acknowledge what had just happened. But no one did. Sylvia sat across from me, cool as ever. She took a sip of wine, leaned toward her friend, and said in a tone meant to be just barely audible, "Some people just don't understand modern taste." Her friend gave a polite laugh. I noticed how they both glanced toward me, like I was some outdated furniture they had to tolerate for the evening. I stood slowly and excused myself from the table. My legs felt heavy. I walked toward the kitchen, not even sure what I was doing, just needing to escape the weight in that room. I paused by the hallway mirror. My reflection stared back at me, cheeks flushed, eyes damp. I didn't recognize her. Was I really that old to them? That invisible? I thought about the past few weeks. How I had stayed up late making handmade decorations. How I cleaned corners no one would see. How I baked test batches of flan just to get the texture perfect. And for what? To be mocked. In my own house. By the woman I once welcomed like a daughter. I remembered the first time Martine brought Sylvia home. I had cooked her favorite meal, she'd mentioned it once, in passing. I remembered how nervous I'd been, wanting her to like me. Wanting her to feel loved. Was she ever really grateful? Or was I just convenient? The moments started coming back, one by one. The times she rolled her eyes when I spoke. The way she once told a friend at a party, "She's sweet, but a little old-fashioned. You know how it is." The smirk she gave me when she corrected me in front of guests about something I knew I was right about. Each time I had let it go. Smiled. Changed the subject. Told myself, she's just young. She doesn't mean it. But tonight, she meant it. And for the first time, I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not just tonight's insult, but every tiny cut she had ever delivered, every little way she had tried to shrink me. I wasn't imagining it. She wanted me small. But now that I could finally see her clearly, I began to ask myself, why? And maybe more importantly, what would I do about it? I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the edge of my bed, replaying everything in my mind, the party, the silence, the way my son didn't speak up. But most of all, her voice, clear and cruel, food fit for dogs. It wasn't just one insult. It was the final straw in a quiet, slow erosion that had been happening for years. I thought back to when Sylvia first came into our lives. Martine had brought her home after college, so full of energy, ambition, and style. She dressed like someone who read fashion magazines cover to cover, and she spoke with that tone people use when they think they're smarter than the rest of us. But I welcomed her. I made her mole, because she'd once mentioned her grandmother used to cook it. I gave her a necklace of mine, one of the few nice pieces I had left from my own mother, because she admired it once while passing through the living room. I even offered her a small loan for their honeymoon when they said money was tight. She thanked me, yes, but it never felt warm. And over the years, those thanks disappeared altogether. I remembered how she stopped asking for my recipes and started criticizing them. How she once told Martine at dinner, "Your mom's cute, but she's stuck in the 1980s, as if I weren't sitting right there." She'd roll her eyes whenever I talked about how things used to be done. If I mentioned sewing or saving foil to reuse, she'd laugh and whisper to her phone, "Boomer behavior." At family gatherings, I began to feel like a background prop. She would host conversations, decide who sat where, what food was trendy enough to serve. And Martine? He followed her lead, always. I told myself it was okay. That as long as my grandchildren were happy, it was enough. That this was just how things worked when your children grew up, they had their own lives, their own rhythms. But slowly, I realized I wasn't just being left out. I was being pushed out. The space I had made for them, my home, my table, my heart, had become a stage for her to perform on, while I waited in the wings for crumbs of kindness. And now, after all the little humiliations, she had finally said what she'd been feeling all along. That I was beneath her. That I was an old woman with outdated recipes and too many opinions. But here's the thing she didn't understand. I wasn't weak. I wasn't blind. I just chose peace, for my son, for the family. Until now. Because when someone finally says out loud what they've been thinking in silence, they hand you something powerful, the truth. And now that I had it, I would never unhear it again. I thought I'd stay invisible for the rest of the evening. After Sylvia's insult, I barely touched my food. I smiled where I needed to, nodded politely, excused myself when I could. I floated from the dining room to the kitchen like a ghost, unseen, unfelt. But as I cleared away some dishes, a soft hand touched my arm. It was Estella, an old friend of the family. We'd worked together years ago, back when the kids were small. She leaned in, her voice low but certain. "That was one of the best meals I've ever had." I looked up, startled. Her eyes weren't just kind, they were anchored, steady, like she'd been watching the whole night and had made her judgment. "Don't let that girl's tongue fool you," she whispered. She couldn't boil water if her life depended on it. I let out a short, shaky laugh. It surprised both of us. Then came a little voice, high-pitched, honest. "Grandma, this was the best flan ever." My grandson, Daniel, stood by the doorway with sticky hands and wide eyes. He was already holding an empty plate, traces of caramel on the edges. I nearly cried, not because of the compliment, but because it reminded me why I had done all this in the first place. Not for Sylvia, not even for Martine, for them, the little ones. The ones who still saw magic in what I created. Just as my heart began to lift, Sylvia passed through the room like a gust of cold wind. She glanced at Daniel and gave a dry little laugh. Well, everyone's taste is different. Then she turned to her friend and added, my mother would have made crème brûlée. Less old-fashioned. The moment could have soured again, but this time, I held on to Daniel's words like a thread back to myself. I didn't answer her. I didn't need to, because in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Sylvia wasn't just trying to hurt me. She was performing, measuring herself by tearing me down. And some of the guests were starting to notice. People were quieter now around her. The warmth at the table wasn't circling in her direction. Estella stayed close to me, offering small talk and a protective presence. One cousin even asked if I had extra flan to take home. A flicker of something new took root in me, not rage, not sorrow, but resolve. Maybe I'd been wrong to give up my voice so easily. Maybe Sylvia wasn't as untouchable as she thought. And maybe next time, I'd let her know I heard her. Something shifted in me that night. I didn't confront her. I didn't make a scene. But I started watching Sylvia, not like a hurt mother-in-law, but like a woman waking up after a long sleep. I noticed things I had ignored before. How she laughed a little too loud when certain guests arrived. How her voice changed, higher, silkier, when she was talking to people with money or status. How she touched her hair while mentioning the networking event she had gone to last week, as if dropping hints about how connected she was. She was working the room. And suddenly, I could see what she was doing, curating her image. Trying to show everyone that she was refined, modern, cultured. That everything around her, my house, my family, even this dinner, was somehow beneath her. She casually name-dropped chefs and restaurants. Oh, when we had dinner at that little bistro in the city, have you tried their duck confit? Life-changing. No one asked, but she offered stories anyway. Later in the hallway, I overheard her telling a cousin that she doesn't really eat sugar, but made an exception for the quaint dessert tonight. As if my flan were some charming relic from a cookbook last century. She never said, thank you. Not once. But she did say, to one of her stylish friends, I keep telling Martine we need our own place. It's just hard when certain people rely on you emotionally. That one hit different. Certain people. I knew what she meant. Suddenly, her little comments over the years made more sense. The way she'd always steered my son away from inviting me on trips. The way she'd shifted family gatherings to her side of the family. The way she had once told me, with a smile, you're welcome to come, if it's not too much for you. It was never about being helpful or supportive. She wanted to make sure I stayed small. That I didn't get too close to Martine. That I didn't become too important to the family. That I never became a threat. And I let her. Because I wanted peace. I told myself I was keeping the family together. That a little disrespect was better than a loud, ugly fight. But watching her that night, I realized, she was counting on that silence. She didn't think I had it in me to push back. She thought I was soft. Simple. Old. But that night, in the corner of my own living room, I made myself a promise. I would stop giving her the benefit of the doubt. I would stop thinking this was all a misunderstanding. And I would start remembering exactly who I was. That night, after everyone left, I stayed up alone in the kitchen. The dishes were still stacked in the sink. The leftover flan sat untouched on the counter. I didn't have the energy to clean. I just sat there, turning things over in my mind, feeling like something had cracked inside me. So I did what I hadn't done in years. I picked up the phone and called my sister. Her voice came through sleepy but warm. What's wrong? She asked immediately. Sisters always know. I hesitated, then blurted it out. Do you think I'm too old-fashioned? That I embarrass Martine and Sylvia? There was a pause. Then a sigh. Not a tired sigh, but one of understanding. Why are you asking me that? She said gently. And so I told her. Everything. The comment about dog food. The little jabs over the years. The way Sylvia had paraded around my house like a queen while I shrank into the background. And when I finished, my voice shaking, my sister said, "Sweetheart, you're not the problem. You've just been too kind for too long." I didn't cry, but my throat tightened. Because deep down, I had begun to believe it was me. That I was too sensitive, too needy, too stuck in the past. "Do I really deserve kindness?" I asked. The words felt pathetic coming out of my mouth. But my sister didn't flinch. "You've raised a son, cooked every meal with love, helped them when they had nothing. What part of that says you deserve disrespect?" I wiped my face with the sleeve of my sweater. She was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd confused being family with being silent. I thought if I didn't rock the boat, they'd love me more. That if I kept giving, eventually they'd see my worth. But love that only flows when you're useful, isn't love at all. The next morning, Sylvia must have sensed something had shifted. She was chipper, too chipper. Said something to Martine about me acting distant lately. When she noticed me watching her from across the kitchen, she leaned in and whispered to a guest, "She's just tired. You know how they get." They, not she, they, as if I were part of some fading, dusty group of people who didn't matter anymore. It hit me like a cold wind. She didn't just think I was old. She thought I was irrelevant. And I knew right then, if I didn't start speaking up for myself, no one would. But I had a secret weapon now. Clarity. And a sister who reminded me that silence was never the path to dignity. It wasn't dramatic. No fireworks, no yelling. Just a small, deliberate choice. A week later, at another family dinner, this time at my son's house, I brought a homemade dish. My classic rice with vegetables, something everyone always used to ask for. Sylvia took one look at it and said, loud enough for the table to hear, "Oh, you brought your famous rice. That's sweet. We'll put it on the side in case someone wants something traditional." Her smile was razor thin. In the past, I would have laughed nervously or stayed quiet. But this time, I met her eyes and said, calmly, "Yes. It's traditional. And also delicious." Then I turned to one of the younger guests and added, "You know, your mother used to ask me for the recipe every year." The room froze for a beat, just a breath of silence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue, but I saw it in Sylvia's eyes. She didn't like it. She blinked once, smiled wider, then took a sip of wine and said with that practiced charm, "Well, you know how it is. Some people just have different palates." I nodded. Some people do. But respect tastes the same no matter the palate. That landed. Subtle, but clear. She changed the subject immediately, started talking about a friend's new kitchen renovation, something about Italian marble and custom lighting. But her voice had an edge now. A tightness. I watched her the rest of the evening. She was still the star of her own show, flashing smiles, telling stories, tossing around compliments that sounded more like veiled digs. But something had changed. She was watching me now, too. I could feel her gauging whether I'd step out of line again. Whether I'd dare speak up. And I realized something. She wasn't used to being challenged. Especially not by me. Because for years, I had made myself small. Convenient. Easy to overlook. But now, with one small sentence, I had reminded her, I wasn't fragile. I wasn't fading. I was still here. And that scared her more than any outburst ever could. After dinner, as we cleared the plates, Sylvia leaned in and whispered just for me to hear, "You're starting to sound a little bitter, you know." I smiled. "And you're starting to sound a little nervous." She pulled back, didn't reply, just walked off to refill her drink. I stood there for a moment, hands on the counter, heart beating steadily. It wasn't much. Just a quiet moment of defiance. But it was mine, and it was just the beginning. I thought I'd regained some footing after that small win. But Sylvia? She wasn't done with me. A few days after that dinner, I started noticing strange shifts in the way people spoke to me. Polite smiles, careful words, a kind of gentle condescension, like they were speaking to someone fragile. Then one afternoon, my niece Clara called me out of the blue. She hesitated for a long moment before blurting out, "Tia, are you okay? I heard you've been forgetting things lately?" I almost dropped the phone. Who told you that? I asked. There was a pause. Then, I don't know, just something Sylvia said in the group chat. That maybe you've been overwhelmed lately. She said she's worried about you. Worried. That word again. The way Sylvia weaponized concern made me sick. It was polite sabotage. I thanked Clara, hung up, and sat in silence. That evening, I checked the family group chat, the one I rarely posted in. Scrolled back until I found it. I think Mama's been under a lot of stress lately. She's been mixing up dates and repeating herself a lot. Just saying it out of love, maybe someone should talk to her. We all want what's best for her red heart. I stared at that little red heart like it was a dagger. She had planted the idea, subtly, sweetly, that I was losing it. And some people were already starting to believe her. Later that week, my neighbor Rosario mentioned how it must be hard getting older, especially when your family starts taking over the important decisions. I hadn't told her anything. Which meant Sylvia had. She wasn't just mocking me anymore. She was undermining me, silently reshaping the narrative, turning me from the solid, dependable matriarch into a confused, forgetful old woman. I confronted Martine gently one afternoon over tea. Has Sylvia said anything to you about my memory? I asked. He looked uncomfortable, stirred his cup. She mentioned something, said she's been concerned. Mom, are you okay? And that broke me in a way her insult at dinner never could. Because my own son, my boy, was doubting me. Not because I gave him reason to, but because she gave him the script. I wanted to scream, to shake him and ask, when have I ever failed you? But I didn't. Instead, I nodded slowly, finished my tea, and left early. In that silence, I made another decision. I had protected them long enough. Now I would start protecting myself. Not with drama, not with threats, but with preparation. Because if she wanted a quiet war, then I would show her how I fight. After that day, I stopped trying. Not out of defeat, but out of clarity. I no longer asked what dishes people wanted. I didn't plan family gatherings. I didn't bake or clean for hours in the hope of praise that never came. I pulled back, not bitter, not loud, just done. It felt strange at first, like setting down a weight I didn't realize I was carrying. I spent my evenings reading instead of meal prepping. I let my answering machine pick up calls I didn't feel like answering. When Sylvia sent a group message asking if I could handle dessert for an upcoming birthday, I replied simply, I won't be cooking this time. No excuse, no explanation. Her reply came fast. So we'll just order something, I guess, face with rolling eyes. Let her plan, let her manage, let her see how much invisible work I had been doing all these years. The quiet unsettled her, I could tell. She dropped more hints in the chat. Hope the cake arrives on time. Guess we'll see how store-bought holds up. Passive little jabs, like fishing hooks cast into silence. I didn't bite. And then, something unexpected happened. I got a letter. A real letter, folded neatly in an envelope, addressed in handwriting I recognized immediately. Estella, the same friend who had whispered kind words to me the night Sylvia insulted my food. Her note was short but powerful. Your rice was perfect. Your flan was better than any bakery. And your silence that night? That was strength. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I read it twice, then a third time, and I cried. Not because I was sad, but because someone had seen me. Not just seen me, but respected me, quietly, without needing anything from me. It gave me something I hadn't felt in a while. Permission. To stop performing. To stop earning love through service. To stop believing that silence was the only way to keep peace. Sylvia noticed my shift. Of course she did. She made a comment at the next family dinner, something like, "It's nice to see you relaxing more. I guess we've finally convinced you to slow down." I smiled and said nothing. Because what she didn't know was that I wasn't slowing down. I was getting ready, watching, listening, reclaiming my space. And soon, I would reclaim a lot more. One afternoon, I invited Martine over for lunch. Just him. No Sylvia, no grandkids, no distractions. He looked surprised when I called. I could hear it in his voice. I hadn't reached out in weeks. I prepared something simple, chicken soup, fresh tortillas, and a small salad. Nothing fancy, nothing to impress, just food that felt like home. He arrived with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Where's everyone else?" he asked. "I wanted to talk to you." "Alone." He nodded, cautious. We sat at the table. I served him. We made small talk, about work, the kids, the heat. Then I looked him straight in the eyes and said it, "Sylvia's comments are hurtful. And I need you to know that." The words hung in the air like a thread between us. He blinked, frowned. "What comments?" "You know what comments," I said gently. "You were there, at the dinner, and the birthday, and last Christmas. You don't have to repeat them to remember them." He looked down at his soup. "Mom, she's not trying to be mean. She just says things. That's her sense of humor. At my expense." He was silent. "It's not just what she says, Martine. It's how she treats me. And how you let her." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't want conflict." "Neither do I replied. "But pretending this doesn't hurt me? That's not peace. That's silence. And it's breaking something in me." That got through. I saw it in his shoulders, how they sagged slightly. Like he'd been holding something too. "I'll talk to her," he said finally, voice low. "I didn't know it was getting to you like this." I nodded. I didn't thank him. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. I also want boundaries. I'm not here to be ridiculed. I'm not your live-in chef. I'm your mother. His mouth opened, then closed. He took a breath. "I get it. I'm sorry." Those words mattered, but I didn't trust them yet. Words can be soft bandages on deep wounds. A few days later, Sylvia tried to clear the air with me. She brought over flowers and said in her best diplomatic tone, "I'm sorry if I've upset you. I think we just see the world differently." I looked at the flowers. "Tulips, my least favorite." "We do see the world differently," I said. "And I'm finally okay with that." She laughed tightly. "So we're good now?" "We're clear," I replied. "That's a start." She left soon after. I watched her walk down the steps, heels clicking too fast. She wasn't used to me standing this tall. But I had finally remembered how. A few weeks passed. The house was quiet. The calls were fewer. And for once, I didn't chase them. Instead, I began remembering. Not the recent years of shrinking myself. Not the dozens of dinners I cooked to be tolerated. No, I began remembering me, before all of that. The young widow who raised Martine on her own. Who worked 2 jobs, learned how to fix the sink when it broke, and still managed to sew Halloween costumes from scratch. The woman who negotiated car prices, balanced every checkbook down to the cent, and never once let her son feel like he was missing anything. I used to be strong. I used to be clear. And somewhere between giving and giving and giving, I forgot, until Sylvia reminded me. Her insults, her whispers, her smug little smiles, those were not just disrespectful. They were my wake-up call. The next big family gathering was at my house, a birthday. I had offered it willingly. Not to win anyone's approval. But to make it clear, this was still my home. I cooked, yes. But not for them. I cooked for me. For the joy of it. I made my arroz con leche, the way my mother used to, cinnamon sticks and all. I lit candles. Wore a blouse I hadn't worn in years, deep red, with gold buttons. It used to be my favorite. People arrived. Sylvia was in rare form, laughing too loud, floating from guest to guest like a hostess in someone else's house. At one point, she walked by the dessert table, looked at my dish, and said with a smirk, "Well, someone's feeling nostalgic." And that was her mistake. Because this time, I didn't stay silent. I smiled, met her eyes, and said, "Nostalgia is better than bitterness. At least it comes from love." Her smile cracked. A few guests chuckled, not at me, but at the sharpness of my reply. A few others raised their eyebrows, watching. She waved a hand dismissively. "It's just a joke, Dulce." "No, it's not," I said softly. "It's a habit. But habits can be broken." She blinked, then turned to talk to someone else. But it was too late. The room had shifted. People saw what they hadn't seen before. Not just Sylvia's digs, but how calmly I held my ground. And that night, after everyone had gone home, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and whispered, "She doesn't get to define me anymore." Because the truth was, I hadn't changed. I had just remembered, and I wasn't going to forget again. After that birthday evening, I knew something for certain: she was watching me now. Not out of respect, out of caution, and that gave me a small, quiet satisfaction. But I wasn't interested in petty victories. I didn't want to embarrass her, or yell, or drag the family into chaos. I wanted to end this, for good. So I began to plan. In secret, I started collecting things: notes, screenshots, voice messages. Times Sylvia had made snide remarks. Comments she left in the family chat. Even little quotes from guests who had witnessed her passive aggressions firsthand. Not gossip, evidence. Then I made an appointment with Lucia, an old friend of mine who now worked as a mediator in family affairs. She had seen it all: inheritance fights, divorces, boundary violations. When I explained the situation, she just nodded and said, "You're not imagining things. And no, it's not normal. Let's make a plan." Her support wasn't emotional. It was strategic. And I needed that. We began putting together a document, nothing formal yet, just a personal record. A timeline of events. Because if things escalated, I wanted to be ready. And more than anything, I wanted Martine to see the full picture, not just her version, filtered through charm and manipulation. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. I kept smiling at dinners, sending birthday messages, baking muffins for my grandkids when they visited. But underneath, I was gathering strength. Sylvia, meanwhile, must have sensed something had shifted, because she started laying on the sweetness again. Texting me, "Just checking in, pink heart," or, "Let me know if you need anything." One day, she even dropped by with a tiny potted plant. "Thought this would cheer up your windowsill," she said with that too smooth tone. I took it with a thank you and set it down without another word. She tilted her head. "Everything okay? You've seemed distant lately." "I've just been busy," I said. And that was true. I had been busy reclaiming my peace, my time, my voice. She didn't like not knowing what I was thinking. In the past, she could read me like a book, predict my reactions. Now, she was flying blind, and her attempts to control the narrative grew more desperate. I heard, through Estella, that Sylvia had been saying things like, "Dulce's been acting off. We're worried about her." Again with the concern. Again trying to paint me as fragile, unstable. But now I was ready. And the next time she tried to play the victim, I would be holding the whole script in my hands. The day of the next family gathering, I felt ready. I had everything prepared. Not just the food, not just the house, but the words I'd been holding inside for too long. I wasn't planning a scene. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for truth. But sometimes, the universe delivers it for you, before you even open your mouth. Guests had arrived. Laughter filled the house. Kids ran through the halls. I was calm, unusually so. I had memorized what I would say if Sylvia pushed again. My hands didn't tremble. My voice was steady. And then Martine pulled me aside. He looked troubled. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. We stepped into the hallway. He rubbed his neck, an old nervous habit from when he was little. Then he said, "I saw some things in Sylvia's phone. Messages. About you. About the family. They weren't kind." I blinked. He went on. "She's been telling people you're losing your mind. That you're manipulative. That you're just a sentimental burden." The words landed like blows. Not because they were new, I already knew that's how she saw me, but because my son had finally seen it too. I confronted her, he said quietly. She tried to say it was all taken out of context. That you were imagining things. But I told her I didn't believe that anymore. My throat tightened. He took a breath. "I think I've been letting her rewrite too many things. About you. About us. And I'm sorry." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, this man I had raised, protected, sacrificed for. And I saw in his face not a boy, not a husband, not even a father, but a man finally waking up. Then came the second twist. At dinner, before I could speak, Estella stood up. She didn't make a speech. She just said, "Dulce, I just want to thank you. Your home, your heart, your food, it's what keeps this family together. Some people don't say it enough. But I will." The table clapped. Small at first, then growing. Some nodded. Others smiled in agreement. And Sylvia? She froze. Her smile faltered. Her hand gripped the edge of her glass just a little too hard. Because this time, she wasn't in control of the moment. And I hadn't even said a word yet. I didn't need to. Not yet. The tide was already turning. And Sylvia? She knew it. After Estella spoke, the room shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. But I could feel it, like a quiet breeze passing through. For the first time in years, the silence that usually followed Sylvia's comments wasn't there. People were listening, and so I stood, not because I wanted a scene, but because it was time. Time for them to hear from me, not through whispers or polite smiles, but through truth. I tapped my glass gently. "May I say something?" All eyes turned to me. Sylvia looked amused at first, her mask firmly in place. But I saw the flicker of worry behind her eyes. "I want to thank everyone for coming tonight," I began. "It means more to me than I can say." I let my gaze travel across the table, at the cousins, the grandchildren, the aunts. Then I looked at Sylvia. "And since we're all here, I think it's time I say something I should have said a long time ago." The room went still. I have spent years cooking, hosting, offering, adjusting, trying to be part of this family in a way that felt honorable, loving, safe. I paused, my voice steady, my heart clear. But I have also been mocked, dismissed, talked about behind my back. A few people shifted in their seats. I didn't name her, not yet. I've been called old-fashioned, dramatic, forgetful. And worst of all, unimportant. I turned, gently, toward Sylvia. Her smile was gone now, replaced by something colder. "But I remember everything," I said softly. "I remember every time I gave. Every kindness. Every humiliation I swallowed in silence for the sake of peace." Sylvia tried to interrupt. "Dulce, really, this isn't, let me finish." My voice was calm, but firm. "Because for too long, I protected your comfort at the expense of my own dignity. And that ends tonight." Now the silence was sharp. Honest. "I'm not here to ask for respect anymore. I'm here to claim it." A few guests nodded. Someone whispered, "Good for her." Sylvia gave a tight smile. "Are you really doing this? In front of everyone?" I tilted my head. "You've done worse. Just not with a microphone." There were gasps. Not because I was cruel, but because I was finally telling the truth out loud. Sylvia stood quickly, muttering something about needing air, and walked out of the room. No one followed. And I sat down, poured myself a glass of wine, and took the first peaceful breath I'd had in years. Because sometimes, dignity isn't given. It's taken back. The moment Sylvia walked out, the tension in the room softened like steam rising off a cooling pot. No one said anything for a beat. They didn't need to. The silence was no longer about fear or awkwardness, it was about relief. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't insulted her. I had simply told the truth. And the truth had done its work. Later that evening, as the guests trickled out with quiet hugs and soft goodbyes, I stood by the front door, steady, present, calm. Martine was the last to leave. He lingered, unsure. Should I talk to her? I looked at him, not as a mother hoping to please her son, but as a woman who had finally remembered her worth. "That's up to you," I said. "But she won't speak to me that way again. Not here. Not anywhere." He nodded slowly. "Understood." The next morning, Sylvia came by. No appointment. No invitation. She walked in holding her phone like a shield and said, with a voice trying very hard to sound composed, "Last night was unexpected. I think we both said things we didn't mean." I didn't invite her to sit down. I looked her square in the eye and replied, "No. I meant every word." Her face shifted, just slightly. "I think we should move forward," she said. Forgive, let things go. I've already forgiven you, I said. But letting things go doesn't mean pretending they never happened. It means I won't let them happen again. She stood there, unsure what to do with that. So I made it clear. You are welcome in this house. But only if you speak with respect. If you cannot do that, you are not welcome. There it was. Not a threat. A boundary. She blinked. Took a breath. So, what now? Now, I said, we see who can act like family. And who only pretends to be. She didn't reply. She turned, slowly, and walked back to her car. No drama. No final insult. Just quiet defeat. I closed the door behind her. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like the old woman trying to please everyone. I felt like the woman who owned her house, her story, and her voice. Let them call it dramatic. Let them call me proud. I call it peace. The day after Sylvia walked out of my house with her pride cracked and her silence returned, my phone started lighting up. Not with apologies, those are rare. But with acknowledgements. A text from one cousin. You said what many of us were thinking. Thank you. A call from Estella. I knew you had it in you. That woman needed to hear the truth. Even a quiet message from Martine, sent late that night. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. I'm trying. Those 3 words, I'm trying, meant more to me than 1,000 justifications. Because for the first time, my son wasn't defending her. He was listening to me. Still, it wasn't easy. Some family members avoided the topic entirely. One aunt sent a message that said, let's just move forward and keep the peace. As if peace was ever built on pretending. Others were more honest. She's always had a sharp tongue, someone said. But we didn't think it was this bad. Of course you didn't, I thought. Because I had been covering the bruises with polite smiles and homemade pie. But the cracks were showing now. And the light was getting in. Sylvia, predictably, began rewriting the story. She posted a photo of her smiling at brunch with the caption, "Some people thrive on drama. I thrive on boundaries." I almost laughed. The irony of her talking about boundaries. But I didn't reply, didn't engage. I didn't need to. Because boundaries, when real, don't need an audience. She stopped messaging me, didn't call, not even on the twins' birthdays. But Martine did. He brought the kids over, just the 3 of them. We baked cookies, watched a movie, played a board game where Daniel cheated and still lost. And when they left, he hugged me a little tighter than usual. I see you now, he said. That sentence stayed with me for days. It didn't undo the hurt. It didn't erase the years of silence. But it was something solid. Something new. In the quiet after the confrontation, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the years I lost trying to be loved by someone who didn't respect me. Relief that I had finally stopped trying. And in that stillness, I made a promise to myself. I would never again beg to belong. Not in my own family. Not in my own home. Weeks passed. The dust settled, as it always does. No big apologies came. No dramatic confessions. But the energy shifted. And so did I. I made some quiet decisions. I would no longer host family gatherings unless I truly wanted to. Not out of guilt, not out of habit, not to prove anything. I would no longer chase relationships that only worked when I stayed quiet. And I would no longer twist myself into knots to make unkind people comfortable. Sylvia didn't come around much anymore. If she did, it was brief, polite, guarded. She kept her distance, and I let her. I didn't punish her. I didn't gossip about her. I simply stopped making space where there was no respect. That, I've learned, is the loudest silence of all. Some family members tried to smooth things over. She's just under a lot of pressure. She has a difficult personality. You know how she is. And I would nod gently, smile softly, and change the subject. I was done explaining pain to people committed to misunderstanding it. Instead, I poured my energy into things that filled me up. I spent mornings in my garden, growing herbs and flowers I used to have no time for. I joined a reading group at the local library, women my age, each with their own stories of learning to stand up a little taller. We drank coffee, shared laughs, and reminded each other that it's never too late to rewrite your role in your own life. And slowly, the loneliness began to fade, not because others changed, but because I did. Martine still visited, sometimes with the kids, sometimes alone. He started asking questions, real ones. Do you think I missed the signs? Was I blind? Why didn't you tell me sooner? I always answered the same way, because I wanted to believe that love was enough. But respect has to live there too. He nodded each time, quietly, regretfully, but I didn't dwell there. We were building something new. Something not based on guilt or obligation, but choice. One afternoon, as I sat on the patio sipping tea, Daniel came up to me and said, "Grandma, do you always make your rice the same way?" I smiled. Almost. But sometimes I change it. Depends on what I need. He nodded like he understood something deeper than food. So did I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. But I was done pretending. And that, my dear, is what peace really tastes like.